watching these videos, people sometimes assume that I prefer cozy fiction. After all, these are cozy RPG reviews. I actually enjoy quite a wide variety of games, but what I gravitate to most often is bright, vibrant fantasy, with stories that are optimistic, colourful, with a sense of wonder, an epic scale, and a focus on larger-than-life characters and communities. There's something of a triangle of fantasy tones in fiction: dark, cozy, and bright. There are plenty of grim and dark RPGs, and recently lots of cozy and relaxing games. But I find bright fantasy a little harder to come by. But right in this bright and colourful corner is Fabula Ultima by Emanuele, a tabletop JRPG inspired by classic JRPGs like the Final Fantasies of the 90s, and developing on the framework of Ryotama, a Japanese TRPG about wanderlust and community. If you ask people why they like Fabula Ultima, you'll often hear about those JRPG influences and the game's focus on collaborative storytelling. And those aspects are certainly things I enjoy. But what really drew me to this game, and keeps it in my attention, is the way Fabula Ultima sets that optimistic tone, not just through its aesthetics, but through its mechanics too. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to show you how. The Fabula Ultima books are A5 paperbacks with a full-colour dust jacket. You can tell my copy is well loved and often played. The cover perfectly sets the tone, looking almost like a JRPG title screen, and emphasising those larger-than-life heroes in a bright world, but in the background they're watched by a powerful villain. And the lovely art continues throughout. The layout is masterful, making each section easy and fast to read, with careful use of language and highlighted keywords. Fabula Ultima borrows its core resolution mechanic from Ryotama. You have 4 basic attributes: might, dexterity, insight, and willpower, each represented by a die size between a d6 and a d12. When you need to roll, you and the GM decide which combination of 2 attributes to use. So jumping a long distance and sticking the landing might be a might and dexterity roll. Picking a lock might be a dexterity and insight. A simple perception check might be insight and insight again. It depends on the situation. You roll those 2 dice against a difficulty number and add any modifiers you might have. Getting a match of 2 6s or above grants you an opportunity you can spend in various ways, either mechanically or narratively. And getting 2 1s is a fumble. I love how simple yet flexible this system is, and it's not too random either. It encourages you to get creative, play to your strengths, yes, but you don't feel punished for trying something against type. Now, tying into this mechanic is the Fabula Point system. Fabula Points are a meta-currency that you earn through hardship. When you fumble a roll, or when a villain appears, or when you're knocked out in combat. There's various ways you can spend Fabula Points. You can invoke your traits to re-roll 1 or both of your dice. So, say your librarian character is researching some information and fails the check. You can say, well, as a librarian, I should be better at this. You can spend a Fabula Point and re-roll. You can also invoke your bonds with people and communities in a similar way. If you're trying to protect an ally, for example, you can spend a Fabula Point to add the strength of your bond with that character as a bonus to the roll. These are such elegant ways of making sure that your character's background and relationships have a mechanical impact. Now there's one other major way you can use Fabula points, and that's to alter the story. You might ask something as simple as, if I spend a Fabula point, can I spot an open window we might use to get in? Or as complex as, I'd like to spend a point and say that my character knows there's an underground settlement in the hills over there. It's quite a powerful mechanic, and it's often what people are talking about when they praise the collaborative elements of the game. When I first GM'd Fabula Ultima, I was a little apprehensive about it. But if you talk it through with your group, and you're ready to give up just a little bit of control, it takes a huge weight off your shoulders as a GM, letting you share your storytelling responsibilities with your players. Gameplay starts with creating the world. The book encourages everyone to take part in the process equally. Again, it's not the sole responsibility of the GM. You choose a subgenre and tone. So you could have a grandiose and epic high fantasy, a more down-to-earth natural fantasy, or the science versus magic themes of techno-fantasy. You take turns populating this world with factions, history, locations, and perhaps most importantly, the threats you'll face. You then decide on a party type. Are you a fellowship on a quest, a rebel band, or perhaps you just happen to be in the tavern at the same time? Only then do you create your character. And you should try to synergize as a party here, because Fabula Ultima encourages highly specialized and varied builds, and it does that by offering combinations of classes. In Fabula Ultima, you choose 2 or 3 classes from the very start, combining the elements you like from each and discovering all the little synergies between the different class skills. If that sounds overwhelming, the book offers some examples of how you might build some familiar RPG archetypes. There's loads to choose from, and spellcasters get access to a super fun mechanic called rituals, which allows you to design your own utility spells in the moment. You also need to pick an identity, theme, and background for your character. These are the traits that you can invoke when you spend Fabula points later. Once your party is ready and on their way, you'll very soon encounter a villain that you love to hate. Villains are the stars of the GM's show, and there's lots of guidance on how to craft them and some associated mechanics too. For example, villains have a pool of Ultima points, a mirror to Fabula points that the villain can use on various abilities, like escaping from a scene to face the party another day. And they can also appear in GM scenes, which are like little cutscenes where the players gain a little insight into their dastardly plans. And remember, you gain a Fabula point anytime a villain appears on set, so it's always an event when your favourite bad guy appears. And if you get into a fight, you get to experience the fun of Fabula Ultima's combat system, which manages to be both highly tactical and narratively focused. First, we're playing a JRPG, remember, so there's no battle mat. Instead, distances are abstracted away and we have a menu of actions to choose from. The narrative side of combat might take the form of Forged in the Dark style clocks, where you can use your action to progress an objective. And instead of positioning, the tactical decisions come from the turn order. You decide which order to take your turns in, which ends up encouraging teamwork as you set up combos together. A memorable example of this for me was a villain I ran who had an assassinate ability that took a full round to complete before dealing massive damage. The party had only 1 round to figure out her weaknesses and stop her before she took down the president. They worked together to probe her defenses, then buff their damage dealer with just the right spells to take her down on the very last turn. It's so much fun. And in keeping with those bright tones, defeat doesn't necessarily mean death. You can choose for your character to die if certain narrative conditions are met, and it would be satisfying to the story, but otherwise random deaths are discouraged. Instead, you're knocked out of the scene, gain some Fabula points, and have to pick a narrative consequence, like losing an important item or being captured. That way, hardship becomes part of the twists and turns of the story, rather than ending the game. For each of the core fantasy subgenres, Fabula Ultima has an atlas: high, natural, and techno-fantasy. Each of these books gives a load of ideas for building a world in that style, like sample locations, NPCs, and plot hooks. They both add to the large roster of classes with thematic new ones that can be easily reflavoured to fit into any world. They give new items, bosses, and unique game-changing mechanics, like the Techno-Fantasy Atlas's Technospheres, which works like Final Fantasy VII's Materia system. I haven't tried it, but there's also a very well-liked starter set called Press Start, in which players unlock features as they progress to teach them the mechanics. And there are quite a lot of free seasonal content packs and playtest materials available too. There are also third-party expansions like Spelunker Ultima, which focuses on dungeon delving, and the Low Fantasy Atlas for less fantastical, more grounded adventures. I'm actually working on one myself, so watch this space. And the Fabula Ultima Discord has a highly active community of homebrewers, creating new classes, new monsters, and new items, as well as super useful community tools like Fultimator, which you can use as a database of hundreds of homebrewed NPCs. If there's one extra thing I could have right now to improve my Fabula Ultima games, it's an official bestiary. There is a short illustrated bestiary in the core book, and tools for designing your own NPCs. But when you're playing to find out with that collaborative mindset, you sometimes need a stat block right now, and find that none of the creatures in the core book quite fit. Fortunately though, there's one in the works. I'm just impatient. To pause for a moment here to acknowledge the three main things that Fabula Ultima sets out to do. First, and perhaps most obviously, it's a tabletop JRPG, and it feels like it. It has a lot of the features you might expect, the look and the feel, the Final Fantasy-inspired combat, but you don't need to be a big JRPG fan to enjoy this game, and to me, it's more than that. Second, it's a collaborative storytelling game. If, like me, you're a GM who's burned out in the past trying to balance a carefully planned out storyline with ensuring the narrative is driven by player choices, then perhaps you can learn something from Fabula Ultima about sharing that load with your players and letting their creativity enhance your own. But if I'm honest, I struggled with letting go of that control at first, and it took other games to teach me that lesson. So, to me, it's more than that, too. And third, it's a bright and optimistic fantasy game whose mechanics mesh together to cultivate that hopeful and larger-than-life feeling, like the epic moments when a failed roll becomes a success because of the strength of your friendship, or the gasps that I hear every time I say, "Everyone, take a Fabula point," because they know what's about to happen. They're about to come face to face with the villain who's been thwarting their plans for weeks. That, for me, is why I keep coming back to this game. There's no such thing as a perfect game, and different games are more suited to different playstyles, different people, and different moods. But in terms of what I look for in games, very few come as close to perfect as Fabula Ultima. And if any of those three aspects sound suited to you, maybe you can experience the hope and optimism in Fabula Ultima as well. Thank you ever so much for watching. No new Ko-fi supporters this month, but I do still want to thank the folks who tipped before. I actually put the tips towards a proper camera stand to replace the exercise bar with a phone sellotape to it that I was using. So thank you so much for investing in the channel. If you enjoyed the review, please do subscribe. Next time I'll be delving back into the realm of solo games. So until then, happy adventures.